Hello everyone, my name is Jenn and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to another weekly reading wrap up. Today we have week 18 of 2021 and it's the first day of May when I'm recording this, which is crazy. I did have my April wrap up went up yesterday on April 30th, so that's just crazy. I read 69 books, which is always fun when it lands on 69. Like, come on, we know it. But I have 18 books to talk about from this week, which is just crazy. I didn't feel like I read that many, but I did read some few like shorter books, so it makes sense that I got through so many. And I was sick last Monday, and all I did was just comfort read all day, so there's that as well. But let's go ahead and dive into these because it's going to take us a while to get through them like it usually does. So let's dive in. So the first one, which was also the book that I was like almost done with last week, and I actually was a part of a live show for this one on Books with Samantha's channel, and that's Shanna by Kathleen E. Woodiwiss. So I won't talk too much about it here because I talked extensively about it on this live show if you want to go check it out. But this is a like old school romance. If you can't tell, this book came out in 1977. And while I feel like Kathleen E. Woodiwiss, I mean, the woman deserves respect because she pioneered single-handedly in the beginning the historical romance genre, which is amazing. There are books by her that are considered more problematic with, you know, dubious consent and straight up non-consent and just, you know, plenty of the things we see in old school romances that make them uncomfortable for us as modern women and modern people in a society that's moved on. However, this book, I feel like, is one of the best representations for me because I didn't see many of those normal pitfalls. There are a few areas where I feel like, you know, there's terms that are used that are maybe uncomfortable. Our heroine, her father does like own an island and plantations. And so there is, you know, slavery that goes along with that and situations like that that are not fun to read about. However, the stuff that happens within this relationship is so amazing. Like, seriously, this heroine will make you want to shove her through a wall. I am not lying about that. But all of these little markers I have are some of the most romantic lines from a hero that I've ever read. Ruark is our hero. It's very hard to pronounce. It's R-U-A-R-K. And the way that Shanna meets him is it starts out with her father really encouraging / demanding that she get married. Now, that is a very like common thing we see in books. But something that makes this different is that her father is, honest to goodness, wants her to have a partner. He loved his wife so much. We see different moments of him mourning for his wife. He knows his daughter is spoiled. He is the one who spoiled her. He knows these things. He knows she needs to grow up. And he really wants her to have a partner. Like, that is what I took from her father, is that him wanting her to be married didn't just have to do with like, I need a money deal. Like, her father is very wealthy. This didn't have to do with he needed better connections. He honestly was okay with whoever she would marry because her father, he actually was poor when he was young too. He's a made man. He made his own fortune. So he honestly doesn't care who she marries, but he wants her to get married. And so this book starts with her dad kind of laying it down that he's like, I'll give you this amount of time to find someone on your own. Otherwise, I'm going to step in and find someone for you. Now, Shanna, being very spoiled and very pissed off that her father would tell her what to do, decides to come up with a scheme where she's going to marry someone who's on death row. And then when that man gets, you know, executed, she'll be a widow and her father will then not try to push her into marrying someone else. So she does this. She goes, she has her servant help her find someone who's on death row. And that's where we meet Ruark, who agrees to go along with this, but he wants one night of passion with her before he's executed. So basically, like, I will marry you. I'm going to give you my name. I'm going to give you everything that I have in this world. And I want to consummate this marriage for real. And so she goes along with this, but then when they're going to have their like one night, she has him hit over the head and she leaves without having sex with him. So her plan is in motion. She got away with her virtue intact. She didn't have to do this transaction with this man. And she thinks that he's been executed. And then the big twist, which probably shouldn't be a twist at all because it's a romance novel, is that he actually ends up getting bought as an indentured servant. So his execution gets bought out, basically. And the person who buys his indenture is her father. So when she goes home to the island that her father, like where he owns a bunch of everything, Roth is now her father's bondservant, which was a form of, like, you know, it's indentured servitude. You could buy your way out of it if you were a good servant and you made a lot of money for the person who bought you from death, or bought out that you could live it out. So Shanna is not happy about this because Roth is still determined to claim his one night with her. That's all he says he wants from her. And she says, I'm not your wife. I don't owe you this. The amount of times this woman says, I'm not your wife. But Roth is very patient, but he also lays down a lot of, like, you know, he lays it down sometimes. And I said I wouldn't go into this book too much, and I definitely just has, but I feel like the setup is important to know. This is a big bitch, okay? This is 650 plus pages for most people. I understand if no one will make it through it. I give this book 4 stars. When I finished the book, I wanted to give it 5 stars. You'll hear me say that in the live show. Like, the feeling that I left this book with was like a mile high. I loved it. The thing is there's about 250 pages in between here. You can see there's no marks that I made. This amount of the book could have been cut out, in my opinion. Okay, so I would not have made it through this book if I wasn't doing it for a live show. And I thank the heavens that I was, because I understand why this is a beloved book. There's people from my hometown who absolutely adore this book, and I would not have made it through it if it hadn't been for the live show. So thank you so much for the Historical Hellions. I think the book club that is checking out older books like this exists for a good reason, because I wouldn't have pushed through this book. And the romance that is displayed and the relationships and the way that they're built is great. But Shanna will piss you off, okay? I'll tell you that, because she is so stubborn and headstrong and a brat and a bitch and stuck and all those things. But what's great is, number one, she is young. And number two, this book takes place over a year amount of time. And we get to see the point where she starts to change and where she starts to realize she's been spoiled and where she starts to have a change of heart. And I feel like you can't do that properly without the page count. I wish that some of this in between, I wish her journey had been shortened a little bit, but by the end of it, I believed it. Because people don't just change in the drop of a hat. This took a lot of things, and not just Roth. Her father calls her out on being spoiled, and it's amazing. Okay, I literally said I was going to stop talking about this. I gave it 4 stars. If you want to talk more about Shanna, hit me up. I absolutely will. Or check out that live show. I'll try to link it somewhere if I remember to. All right, then I also finished The Heiress Gets a Duke by Harper St. George. I received an ARC of the second book in this series, and so this one is on AnyPlay, and I also had bought a copy because this is beautiful. I love that it was mass paperback size, but when I saw what this cover looked like, I thought it was going to be a trade paperback size, but I love that it's matte. I mean, it's beautiful, but the cover is gorgeous. So this one is about an American heiress named August, and she works at her father's ironworks. This is a Gilded Age romance. And then we have a duke whose name is Evan, and his dukedom is in a lot of trouble. He needs to marry an heiress. Her and him have an amazing connection. Just right off the bat, they have crazy chemistry. And so he is being approached by her father to marry her younger sister, but he wants August. And I love that about Evan, because he genuinely is like, I do need to marry a woman for money, but I want to care about her. Like, I want to have the potential to love this woman. And so because him and August have that connection, he makes that choice to pursue her over her sister. Because he's like, I don't want to, her sister doesn't want to marry me. I don't want to marry her. I don't want to be married to this woman who doesn't want me and then be secretly wanting this sister. So number one, I was like, Evan, you are a stand-up guy, because how many romance novels have we met where the hero has the opposite way of thinking, where he's like, oh, well, I have to marry this sister, so I'm not going to think about anything else. I love that. The thing is, August very much is an independent, strong woman, and she wants to keep working for her father, and she feels like once she gets married, she won't be able to do that. The thing is, her parents are absolute assholes. I will say that. Like, the thing that comes to be known by August is that her father was maybe just humoring her all this time, you know, and that he saw it as like quaint and cute that his daughter would help him with business. Where she has this potential with Evan, where Evan sees how amazing she is, and he's like, yes, we need to have a marriage of convenience, but we have this potential for love, we have this potential for a great relationship, and he's like, and I don't want to smother your dream. Like, I want to be your partner, I don't want to be your master. And August just doesn't believe that, because she's seen friends of hers marry in marriages of convenience, and it hasn't been good ones. So the struggle with this is that, I didn't see the issues that August kept having with Evan. Granted, I understand that I'm reading this from a 21st century, you know, and I also believed Evan. I was in his head. I knew how infatuated he was with her. And I know August just has such a chip on her shoulder for trying to be shoved into a certain hole. But, pun intended. But I'm just being honest, like, this was not something I could actively enjoy because of how much she fought this until the very end, almost to the point of Evan being like, well, then why am I even trying? Because you don't want me. And it was hard. So I ended up giving this a 3-star because it had a great setup, but the way that she fought him so much, it just didn't make it enjoyable, because it wasn't sexy for her to not trust this guy when he was consistently proving. And then to top it all off, it had a third act conflict of just a horrible miscommunication that I was like, we'd just seen them getting to the point of communication, and then it just all blew it to hell. And I was like, okay, I'm done with that. All right, some that I can talk about a little quicker because I've spent 12 minutes only talking about 2 books. This is welcome to a wrap up with Jenn. Then I read Claiming His Baby Girl by Cameron Hart. This was pretty cute. This was one of like this girl, I think she's 19, and it's her father's friend, and her father is getting her, I can't remember why they're in the same place. I don't know if her dad is getting remarried for the 3rd or 4th time or whatever, but he's a pretty neglectful dad. And yes, I think it is like a remarriage that they're together. And then it's been a long time since she's seen this dad's friend, and now she is above age, and he all of a sudden is seeing her differently, and they do have a bit of a daddy king relationship. This is a pretty short book. It actually just released. I'm on Cameron Hart's, like, I'd signed up for some giveaways, and you know when you do that, you end up being in, like, everybody's mailing list, which is annoying sometimes, but then sometimes they write a book like this, and I was like, you know, I could do with it a little bit of daddy kink would be nice. And it was a shorter one, so I gave this one 4 stars. I read Royally Matched by Emma Chase. If you saw my April wrap-up already, you'll know that I gave that book 5 stars. This was the 2nd book in her, like, royal series. This one is about the younger brother, Prince Henry, and he ends up doing kind of like a dating show because he's bored, and he ends up falling for one of the contestants' sisters. Now, he isn't really doing this dating show to marry one of the people, but he gets approached by the TV producer. She's an American, and it's like The Bachelor, and they're doing like the royal edition. So she's like, you don't actually have to marry one of these women, but we're going to have a bunch of blue-blooded women, and we're going to do this dating show with them. And it's pretty funny, and his love story with Sarah is really beautiful. Sarah suffers with anxiety. I felt like there was good representation of that. So it's also a weird thing to be around, because being around the prince, the crown prince of this country, you are going to be in the spotlight, and that is very like hard for her to be around. But I really loved how their relationship played out. It was so sweet. There was no like real angst. Just the way they fell in love was so beautiful, and their relationship together just made me swoon so hard. So I gave this one 5 stars, and I regret nothing. Then I read The Heir by Sophie Lark. This is book 1 in the Kingmaker series. It is a kind of a sequel, well, not kind of, it is a sequel series to the Brutal Birthright series. This is the next generation. It is the kids of her previous series she has written. And this one is about the son of, who are the parents of these ones? Sebastian and Yelena's son, and then Nessa and Mikolaj's daughter. And they've grown up as best friends. They're called practically cousins, right? Because they are, it's like a sister and a brother married separate people. Wait, no, because they're not related somehow. How does it work out? okay, their siblings are married to I don't know. The Griffins of the Goblins are messed up. There is no blood relation between these two at all. Okay, there's none. But their families grew up together. All the families are like connected through marriage and everything, but nobody is like, these two specifically aren't related to each other. But there's this academy called Kingmaker's Academy, which is for the children of mafia and powerful crime families send their kids here after high school to learn their roles. So there's the heirs, the spies, the muscle, and then like something else. So I can't remember all four, but they basically have like four things. They wear uniforms that remind me of Slytherin house. And this book kind of takes place during the whole year basically of school. And these two, they've grown up as friends, and then their enemy, who is actually the one guy's cousin, because it's his mom is a brother to that guy's dad. His name is Dean, and he decides that he wants Anna. And she kind of goes along with it for a while. I don't know. So that's my point. That's the setup. I was very hyped for this. Things that I liked. I did like the school setup. The thing is it was very college-y, but because of how it's set up, it also felt very high school, even though it's supposed to be like, you know, additional education. They've graduated high school. They're college age. It felt very high school because it's an academy where, you know, they're in houses and they have like dorm rooms and everything. And it was just a very different like shift from what was happening in the Brutal Birthright series. And then also there's a ton of setup that Sophie has to do with this series. And so, yeah. So a lot of this book was that. And it had that kind of like Harry Potter vibe where nothing big can go down until the end of the school year type of thing. It was still really brutal because they are mafia kids and you're supposed to be safe while you're at this mafia school, but also there are kids who die there because there are rival families. And you're not allowed to go home when you're there. There's scheduled phone calls. You don't get to have a cell phone all the time. Like, it's very supposed to be a safe place for the kids, but also there's competitions that happen and all these things. So I ended up giving this a 3.5 star, also because Anna was extremely frustrating to me, okay? And the reason why that bugged me is that, number one, these two had been friends since they were born, okay? They've been friends their whole lives. They grew up together. When a certain situation happens and she immediately like is upset and distrusts him, I was irritated because I don't believe that the kind of relationship built up that you would just turn your back on that person for what happened, and not try to find out more. I just didn't like. And also her being the daughter of Mikolaj and Nessa, I expected more of her than what she gave me. And the way that she was kind of jerking Dean around. Like, Dean was in the wrong in a lot of ways because we do get the three perspectives. It's very, I wouldn't call it, I mean, it is kind of a love triangle. That's what happened. And I mean, I'm not a fan of those, but I understand what was happening. I just didn't like it. So that's my point, is that this book was great setup. It's still really important that you read this one if you're going to continue the series. I'm just being honest that it didn't fully work for me the way I wanted it to. Like, Anna made some choices where I'm like, bitch, what are you doing? And I don't know if I was Leo, like how quick I would be to just get over it. But it's like he misses his friend so much that he kind of just gets over it pretty quickly. So I still love Sophie Lark. And the next one is The Rebel. And I'm so excited for that one. That one comes out this Tuesday. So I'm still totally hooked in the world. This one just didn't work for me. Then I read The Mentor by Elin Pierre. This is the next book in the Men of the North series. This one is about, nope, this isn't about Finn. Archer. This one is about Archer, and this is the school endeavor is happening. So, the Motherlands and the Men of the North, they're working on this school where they raise some of their children side by side to see how it works and if we can start integrating our societies. So this is the next step in that process. This one was good. I just get real sick of the heroine's attitude. I know I'm on the side of the men, but I'm a bit more of a traditionalist, and I appreciate what this series is doing so much. I gave this one 4 stars still. This series is fucking fascinating because it shows, you know, we all know about toxic masculinity. We're shown what it is. We're pointed out where it's bad. And like, you know, me as a reader, I like reading it sometimes. Don't really want it in real life. But this series also shows us what toxic femininity could do and how that could be just as damaging. They are both equally damaging if taken to the extreme. And I really love the look into that. The next one in the series is The Warrior. Well, actually, okay, here's what happened. I actually skipped book number 4 because Tiffany was reading it and she wasn't really loving it. And also the couple in number 5 is a second chance romance. It's a married couple. It's a marriage in trouble. And I wanted to read it so bad, and I thought that it was book number 4. And when I finished book number 3, I realized, oh shit, it's actually book number 5. So I did skip book number 4 in this series. After hearing what Tiffany had to say about it, I don't feel like I missed that much, but whatever. So yeah, so The Warrior is like, we've seen this couple and heard about it for the last 4 books, right? 3 books in my case. And in the first book, this couple is married. They're together. It's Magni and Laura. And Laura, she actually runs away to the motherlands because she wants to learn to fight and become a fighter. And her husband won't teach her. He's like, no, you need to stay in your box. And we've seen him grow and change through the past few books. And so now we have this book and we get to see what Laura leaving him, what it did to him, and how he wants her back so badly, but he doesn't know how to let go of his past and like his ideals. And so Laura wants him back so bad, but she's like, things have to be different. We can't keep doing them the way we were doing them. I'm not going to be satisfied to live my life the way that we've been doing it. And so they have to come to a compromise for good or not, you know. And I gave this one 4.5 stars. It was great. Then I read The Possessive Daddy Next Door by B.B. Hamel. This one was a 4-star. This actually is continuing a series that I started last year. I didn't realize how it was connected because it's been so long since I read it. But I think it's connected through the mafia tie that's like real subtle in this. But this is about kind of like this rich girl. She is out going for a hike and she hurts herself. And she has a near neighbor who is a single dad. His wife has died or left him. I think she died. And so it's just him and his little girl, and he kind of rescues her and brings her home. And then she actually offers him a job. He was previously a police officer, and her family, they have security at their home. And so he offers her this job, which is going to be close to home. And they have this crazy sexual chemistry, and it's really great. The reason why I only gave this 4 stars instead of 5 stars, just being honest, is that it was called Possessive Daddy Next Door. But there was no daddy kink in this book. Now, I know daddy doesn't have to mean daddy with a capital D, but that's what I was expecting, and I didn't get it. And so I read this whole book with the explanation that, like, okay, when are we popping out some of the DNS? I mean, the sex was good, but it wasn't what I wanted. So I'm sorry to hold that expectation against the book, but if you're going to put your book that is in, like, erotica or that's in romance, and you put daddy in it and there's no daddy happening, he literally is a daddy. Like, he has a little girl, which then I find a weird the context then of like, he's called daddy because he's a dad, but it's in the context of like possessive daddy next door. I don't know. It didn't work for me that you use that title to probably reel people in who like daddy, and then it wasn't there. So then I read Royally Endowed by Emma Chase. This is the 3rd book in which so it's the 3rd book in the trilogy, but there is also a prequel book that's about the current queen and when she becomes queen, which I will be reading. But Royally Endowed is the sister of the princess. She married to become a princess, and her bodyguard. And this book was great. Like, this book takes place over like a 5-year time. Like, it takes place when, our heroine, when she's only 17 and she first meets this guy, because when her older sister marries into the kingdom of Wesco, marries the prince, she gets a bodyguard so that she is protected. And so he is the head of her security team, and he lives with her in the United States while she is going to school and doing all these things. And he's not that much older than her. I wouldn't really consider this like an age gap because he's 22, 23 when he becomes her bodyguard, and nothing happens for 5 years. There really starts to be some chemistry with them when she's like 22 and he's 25. So I don't tend to call books age gaps when like the age difference isn't like a point of the story and it's less than 10 years, because it's like people are different ages and their age differences never enter into it. It's more of like the class thing. But it's also interesting because she was raised poor as well. She's only come into this like, you know, wealthy family when she was 18. But in his head, the royal family is just so far above him that he's kind of making that a thing. This was still beautiful. It was also a great like wrap up to everybody's stories. I know there's some little novellas that happen after, and I'll definitely have to check those out. I gave this one 4.5 stars. It was so pretty. The reason why I held off is that I didn't mind the time jumps, because it didn't do the Kennedy Ryan thing where it jumps ahead a ton. It would jump ahead 5 months and we'd see a scene of what's happening. And so you got to see like the attraction building between them as she got older. And we did like the biggest time jump, I think, was like 18 months. And it would be to these like different events in their lives and everything. So it didn't bother me because we didn't just like, boom, jump ahead super far and they were apart. Like that's the thing. They are around each other and together this whole like 5-year time, intimately part of each other's lives, because he's there all the time. So I really liked it. Then this was so much fun. I was back into the Ice Planet Barbarians. So I read Barbarian Alien, which is book number 3. I'm not going to go into the total details of each one of these because they're kind of all the same. It's these women on this planet. Y'all know it. This one I gave 4 stars to. Really liked it. Then there was Barbarian Lover, 4 stars. I really like this series. I'm so glad I'm diving back into them. It's so hard to not just binge them all, but I'm like taking my time. Then I read The King's Spinster Bride by Ruby Dixon because I watched a video that my friend Avery did from Avery Love Books. She did her favorite royal romances, and one of the books on there was this one, and she actually said it's one of her favorite books of all time, and it's only novella length, but it's absolutely beautiful, and it has so many tropes that I like. It absolutely does. It has an older woman. It has a virgin hero and heroine. It has pining. It has royalty. It has no one will do it for me but you trope, and it's fantastic. So this is only novella length, so I don't want to like spoil what happens, but the setup is there's this princess, and her father has taken this young prince as a captive, the barbarian prince as a captive. He's only 8 years old. She's, I think, like 15 or 16 years old. I don't know quite how old she is. I think that's about how old she is. Maybe a little older. And she's been protecting this boy in her rooms. So when his father comes and defeats her father, her men come to kill him to get revenge, and she won't let them. She's like, this child has nothing to do with this. We are not going to hurt him. And they're like, oh, it's so good. I won't say all the words. I was literally going to quote the whole thing, but I won't because this book is only 160 pages and you have to read it. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Avery, if you're watching this, thank you so much for making that video. But anyway, so a little bit more context. So she protects him. Her one and only act as queen for the like 3 hours that she's a queen between when her dad dies and his father takes over is to protect this boy. And so when he gets rescued, he says, I'm never going to forget that you did this. And he's just this little boy. And she's like, okay. And then she gets banished to a convent because they don't want anyone to rally behind her and support her. And so for 16 years, she lives in this convent. And when this young prince's dad finally dies and he becomes the king, he goes to find her because there's only one woman who he will ever consider being his bride. And it's this woman. Done. Fucking done. It wasn't long enough. That is the only problem. But I gave this 5 stars and I regret nothing. It was fucking beautiful. And I wish that it was more. Like, I needed it to be more books because I just wanted them to be together forever. It was so good. Oh. All right. And then I read Barbarian Mine by Ruby Dixon. This is book number 5. And this was the first one that I gave 5 stars. I was talking to Jesson and Crystal separately, and I was like, why am I not giving these 5 stars? Like, what else am I looking for in one of these books, right? Because I know they're cheesy and they're predictable and all those things, but a lot of romance novels are, right? And I was like, why? What is it that I'm missing? Well, here's the thing. I read book 5, which if you read Transcendence by Shay Savage, you need to fucking read this book because so much of it is the same. We have this barbarian alien who he's been raised alone. He's been alone on his own since he was like 10 years old. So he can't really speak. He doesn't know what his qui is or what resonance is. All these things that all of the Sakui know about. And so when he happens to run into, I think, is Harlow his mate? I think Harlow's his mate. I can't remember. He doesn't know what's happening when he when he resonates for her. And so he hits her over the head and takes her back to his cave. He just knows that he's really like turned on and he doesn't know what's going on. And so even though Harlow now knows how to speak Sakui, because the women have like learned it, he doesn't speak at all. So it literally reminded me of Ed and Beth. Because he doesn't even know what like sex is or like why his cock is doing all these things. Like, was so good. And I gave it 5 stars. I was like, this is it. This is what I was waiting for. This is a 5-star. So I did it. Then, here we go. I reread Wolf Gone Wild by Juliette Cross. I got an audio arc of the audio for this, which comes out May 18th. And Juliette, who is a good friend of mine, was like, would you please listen to this and do a review for it? And I was like, fuck yes, girlfriend, I will. Because I love this book. I gave it 4.5 stars when I read it. I think I read it back in November or December. I read both of them. And so she has Aiden Snow is the male character. And if you've read Wolf Gone Wild, you'll know that Mateo, his inner wolf, is named Alpha. And Alpha talks in Mateo's head constantly. Because that's what's happening in this book, is that his wolf is not able to come out during the full moon. And so his wolf has like pushed his way to the surface. You know, the embodiment of him has pushed his way to the surface. And he's like, hey, let me out. All the time knocking and just driving Mateo crazy. And so he goes to the Savoy sisters. That is how you pronounce it. I'm just telling you. It's Savoy. And he asks for help. But the thing is, they don't help werewolves because the oldest sister says so. But Evie, she sees Mateo and she realizes how good he is and what a good person he is, let alone a werewolf. And so she decides to help him. So he realizes that his wolf, that Alpha, is calmer when she's around, and he's an artist, and he needs to finish his commissioned pieces, so he begs Evie to spend time with him so that he can get his projects done. This book is full of nerdiness. This actually has some older characters too. They're both in their, well, Mateo is in his 110s because werewolves live longer. Witches will live longer too, because their magic helps keep them young for a longer amount of time. But Evie's in her like mid-30s. So it's just nice to read about some older characters because I'm getting there myself now. This is super nerdy. There's lots of great comic book stuff and Star Wars stuff. And if you know anything about Juliette Cross, you know that her and her family are pretty nerdy like that as well. She also has a podcast with my friend Jessin. I don't know why I'm just pumping this up, but I love Smart Women Read Romance. And you know, sometimes you can just manifest goodness in your life. And one of those things for me was when I became friends with Jessin and Juliette. And it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me during quarantine is to have friends like this. So yes, I'm shamelessly promoting my friend's book. I don't fucking care. It's delightful. And I loved rereading it and listening to it because I love audiobooks. And so eventually all of the Stay a Spell books will be on audio and it'll be amazing. Whew. Okay. And then I also read The Rakehell of Roth by Amalie Howard. This is book 2 in, I think it's going to be, it's the Eversley sisters. But it's also called the Regency Rose. Like, it's funny. Like, in her book, it's called Regency Rose. On Goodreads, it says, like, the Eversley sisters or whatever. But this one is a marriage in trouble. At the end of the last book, we saw that Astrid's sister, Isabel, had married the Marquess of Roth. It was kind of a surprise to everybody. Well, here's the thing. He married her, bedded her, and then he moved to London, and he left her at the family estate. And he hasn't been back in 3 years. Isabel is getting pretty tired of this shit, so she decides to go to London and tempt her husband into loving her. And I love a situation like that. Our hero is punishing himself for reasons we will find. And so he very much is resisting happiness and being with his wife. And she's just like, that's stupid. Let's be together. One thing I will say is, so I listened to this one on AnyPlay. This is available on AnyPlay. And my biggest issue with this book was honestly the narrator. I was kind of disappointed. I feel like she made some really weird choices, and like, I need audiobooks to get through a lot of books. Like, that's just how I'm able to read these mass amount of books that you guys love seeing me read so much. And so I really rely on audiobooks, and I rely on good narrators. And I feel like the inflections she used and the choices she made didn't go with some of the scenes. Like in some of the love scenes, the way that she would emphasize some things. I mean, I'm sure it's awkward, whatever, but this is your career. And especially if you're doing romance novels, I think you need to like figure it out. So unfortunately, like, because like that's part of my experience, like I can't divorce myself from it. So this book, which, I mean, I still feel like 4 stars is a fair rating because there was a lot of things that were typical about this. The hero, I feel like, tortured himself for too long. But I did like the grovel and the, you know, what's it called? Like the reconnection at the end of it, I thought was really great. And then the peek into the future, because I believe this is just going to be a duet. Because Amalie Howard has some other books coming out this year, and I don't think they're connected to these ones. So I think this is just a duet about the 2 sisters, as far as I know. And the peek into the future of their lives for the epilogue was so good. Like, it was really cute. Also, there's a little bit of like power exchange happening in here both ways. Like, the female gets a little dominant and he's like, I'm usually dominant, but like, I like this. So if you like just little hints of that, this was really, really tasty. So 4 stars. Then I read To Desire a Devil by Elizabeth Hoyt. Yes, I can't go a week without an Elizabeth Hoyt. I still have more of hers to read and I can't wait. Side note, next Saturday here on my channel, I'm going to get the StreamYard link made here today when I do my computer work. We are going to do a Maiden Lane video. We're going to talk about our favorite books, our least favorite books, our favorite plot lines. We're mostly going to keep it spoiler free, but I mean, I'm sure it will like tip into spoilers sometimes. So definitely read as much Maiden Lane as you can because I freaking love her. But anyway, this one is book 4 in the Legend of the Four Soldiers. So it actually wraps up that series. So this one is about Beatrice Corning, and she is the niece to the Earl of what is it called? Hastings? Dude, what's his Earl name? I can't remember what it's called. But the real Earl, Renaud, he has been kept captive on the continent for many years, and so he was thought to be dead. He was in the same ambush at Spinner's End, but he was taken captive this time and had been living with Native Americans for 7 years. And he finally made his way back home. And people think he's an imposter. They think he's not who he said he is. And he's determined to get his name back. Him and Beatrice have crazy chemistry. And in this book, we're also trying to find out who the traitor was. That is kind of the plot line going through this whole like series, is there was someone who betrayed these men at Spinner's End and caused all the damage that has happened in the previous novels. So this is also a very scarred hero outside and in. There's PTSD in this, as there was in previous books in the series. And I just really loved their relationship together. And I loved how they worked through his trauma. And how he doesn't, like, I want to be clear too, like, he was kept captive by Native Americans, but he also cared about them a lot because he was adopted into a family there. And there are some horrible things that happened to his family there that he is determined to live a good life and to have the life that was meant to be him as the heir to this earldom, so that what happened to his family there wasn't in vain. So there might be some things in here that people are like, oh, that's really bad. But what happened to him definitely happened to people. And I feel like they're not talked about in a disrespectful way in the way that he tells this story, because he lived with them for a very long time and he had deep feelings for people. So I just want to be clear about that could be a trigger warning for people, and maybe something others are uncomfortable with. But I didn't read this and be like, wow, you're really trashing the Native Americans in this one. That's not how I felt. It felt the same way of like reading about them in like Outlander. If you find the problems with an Outlander, then you won't like it. But I'm just telling you how it was for me. I gave this 4.5 stars. Then I read Bride of the Emperor by Hayley Faiman. This was also the 4th book in a series and the final book in the Prophecy of the Sisters by Hayley Faiman. I gave this 3.5 stars. Oh, this video is getting long, and I feel like most of you haven't read this series, so I don't need to go into the full details of it anyway. But this is a fantasy romance series about 4 sisters who get pulled into this world, and each of them is drawn to 4 of the strongest men in this world. It is a trader who is like, he's a medieval king. There's a Viking warrior. There is a cowboy warrior, and there's this emperor. And they're all in the same world, but in different areas of it. Oh, sorry, my eye. And we are finally at the 4th and youngest sister, and she needs to find her mate and fall in love and have a child, and then they will be able to take on this great evil at the end. So a couple things. I didn't like the Roman aspects of this. I didn't like that it was an emperor that got chosen. I didn't like a lot about it. And I know that it's supposed to be uncomfortable, but there was a lot of just really uncomfortable sexual situations that didn't have to do with like non-consent, but just had to do with like miscommunication. And it was just tearing me apart, because they're trying to show that in Rome, in this depiction of Roman life, that's the thing, like in each of these books that we've been, it's not historical. It's a fantasy setting, but it's inspired by whatever time period that we're dealing with, okay? Is that they were just so free with their bodies, and there was orgies happening all the time, and whether or not that's true, because I'm not picking on the history of it. The fact is that in this book, our heroine makes it very clear. She's like, I don't want you to share your body with anyone, and I don't want to share my body with anyone else. But yet he considers blowjobs as like, you are defiling your body if you touch my cock. Like, only slaves are supposed to do oral pleasure. And she's like, so there's this scene where they're going to, like, they're undressing each other, and there's slaves in the room, and the slave woman kneels down to start sucking him off, and she runs out of the room because she's like, I don't know how else to tell you that I'm not comfortable with someone else touching your dick. And he's like, but she's preparing me for you. And it's like he's not listening to her. And I know what the symbolism of this is supposed to be. But then, like, on their wedding day, there's a bunch of story that has happened, and they're finally ready to get married, and it's going to happen. And then there is a public orgy that happens to celebrate their wedding. And she's like, how many times did I have to say that I don't want to participate in, nor watch you participate in an orgy? And he's like, this is part of my culture. You are defaming my culture if you're not willing to let this happen. And she's like, I've given up my entire world. Like, I won't see my family again. I'm here to make this prophecy happen. And you can't respect that I don't want other people to touch you. And I know what the story is trying to do, because eventually we have like a meeting of each other. But I hated the hero so much by the time we got to that point. That's the thing. This author alienated me from this hero so much by that point, that when he finally breaks and he's like, you're right, I don't want anyone else to touch you, and I don't want to touch anyone else, I was like, about time, motherfucker. I don't care. So there you go. That was me letting some steam off. And it bummed me out, because the first 3 books in this series, I love them. I gave them 4.5 to 5 stars. One of them I think is a 6-star read for me, because I thought it was such a unique thing. But then Tiberius just jumped it off a cliff for me. And so I didn't even appreciate the wrap up where we brought all of our characters together, and these sisters got to see each other again, and everything is getting, we're fighting the evil together. I didn't give a flying tit about it. So I gave 3 stars. It was a bummer. And then I just finished Taking Turns by J.A. Huss. This is the first book in a trilogy that starts out as a quad. Like, the relationship is supposed to be a quad. These men, for the last 10 years, they have had relationships with women together. It is not a sword crossing thing, but they do menages together. So they do like MMFM stuff, but not the MMs crossing. So It's not really reverse harem though, because I wouldn't say that like the woman's not really in control of everything. I mean, she is. I don't know. This book is too complicated to explain. The dynamics are fascinating. I'm going to be continuing this series, but I will say that this isn't a series where we're working towards all of us being together. Like, of these 3 guys that she's in this relationship with, it's not really like it's a love square, but it becomes clear that one of them is the one that she'll be with. So I'll say that. Like, we are willing to share, but there is going to be one that is her, like, one. And then the next 2 books, what I believe, I haven't started them yet, but I'm very excited to, are about the other men finding their relationships too. So I gave this 4 stars. I was fascinated by it. Because again, it wasn't really a reverse harem. They label it as a menage. They like to have menage. They believe that they make a perfect relationship together, because they're like, we each give you something that the other can't, and then you give us the part that we can't have with us, and so we're, you know, a poly relationship. Plural is what they call it. I don't know. So it's fascinating, and I have positive feelings for it. But I think I won't know how I feel about it until I've read all 3 of them. So I gave it 4 stars, and we're leaving it there, and we'll see where we go. Okay. Woo! We kept this under an hour. Yay. That was 18 books that I just talked about. Holy crap. My throat hurts now. Ugh. So thank you so much for watching this if you made it all the way to the end. I really appreciate you. And yeah, I will see you next time, everybody. Bye.